Um, okay, so welcome everybody, and welcome to our next installment of Idea Chats. My name is Greg Dennis, and my pronouns are he, him. And I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I am on today, the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people watching. I'd also like to acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So our guest this month is Samara. So Samara, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Samara Thorn. My pronouns are she, her, and I am on the lands of the Ngunnawal people. And it's pretty cool to be in an environment where, you know, science and story has been passed down from generation to generation for thousands of years, and we get to be part of that, which is very cool. My role at the at TMOS at the centre is as an engagement manager, which means that I am working on a lot of the marketing comms, but also the outreach portion of the centre's activities. And so I work a lot with students and schools, mostly because of my background. Yeah.
Cool, amazing. And we'll touch on your background a little bit later. Okay, so first question off the rank is, what is your favourite city in the world and why?
It is really hard for me to say because I'm an army brat, which means I moved from city to city like my entire childhood. I was never anywhere for more than 2 years. So I guess for me, my favourite city is wherever my mum is.
Oh,
that's terrible. I turned 40 in a couple of weeks, but still, like, wherever my mum is, you know, don't tell my husband.
And where is she currently?
She's on the Gold Coast.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
Oh, like, if I think about this, I think my favorite city in the world is Venice, but that's simply because there's like nothing else like it.
Yeah.
And it's such a weird sort of concept to be like, oh, there's no cars. Like, it's just this weird thing. And every time I've gone, I've just sort of like fell in love with it. And then everything around it, even when it's been like horribly wet or horribly hot, you're just like, oh my God, it's so amazing.
It's the new and different, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
I mean, and that's part of why people travel, is that they just want to experience something new and different. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, question number 2. What are your hobbies?
Okay, well, I mean, most people know this if you know me at all, but I write romance novels. So when I'm not working or looking after my pets, I have 2 cats, 2 dogs, 8 chickens, a few too many chickens. I'm writing romance novels.
Okay, so when I first found this out, I was like super, super excited. And I've got to buy one. Like, I saw on your Instagram the other day that you have some up for sale. So I was like, yes, do it now.
I do, but the sale is only for Canadian and US readers. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm pretty sure I can buy one anyway.
Yeah, okay. Next, when you come up, I'll sign it.
Okay. So question number 3, if you could have superpower, what would it be and why?
Okay, so the reason I knew my husband was the one is because we both wanted this really obscure superpower, which is I would like to just be able to put my hands on the spine of a book and have like all of that information and story just like downloaded into my brain.
Okay.
And then when my husband said that, I'm like, you weirdo. I can't believe we both have the same thing.
That is actually a really good one. But would you also extend it to not just books, though? Like, obviously, as we become more of a digital world, like, but then how would you do that?
I don't know. With books, I'm still pretty, I have a mix. I love to own paperbacks.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's not easy to show you, but like all my bookcases are arranged by color, which I know drives some people mad, but I think looks really pretty.
Yeah.
But I actually really like reading ebooks.
Yeah.
So I enjoy the experience of ebooks more than I enjoy the experience of reading paper books, but I like to own paperback books. So if I really like it, I'll buy both.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, I only read on my iPad. And I think also, like, before I left Australia, I had like numerous bookcases like full of books. But then I was like, I can't take these.
I regret doing the cull though. When I moved into state, I got rid of so many.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh, you know, I'll build my library back up, and I just haven't built it up the way I used to, which is really.
No.
it's one of my big regrets is selling off lots of my books.
But maybe once you hit 40, just start buying books.
Yeah, oh, trust me.
No more chickens, just books.
No, honestly, the during lockdowns last year, my local bookstore was doing it really hard, and so I spent a fortune. Like my TBR list is so big because I bought but because of lockdown, I also couldn't read. I just couldn't focus enough to read, and unfortunately I haven't even picked that back up again. Like, you know, even now it's really struggling to read, but I bought more books during that period than I have, so yeah.
Okay, so question number 4, this one's always interesting. Dead or alive, who would you most like to have dinner with and why?
Oh, I totally forgot to prep for that question. Who would I really like to have dinner with? I mean, I have a friend who's coming over to Australia really soon, and I'm really looking forward to catching up with her for dinner.
Oh, cute.
I'm sure that's not as exciting as you would like, but like realistically, I've never seen her in person. You know, it's a friendship that's been entirely online, and so I'm really, really looking forward to.
And so how long have you known this person? Is it another author or?
Yeah, she's another author, Bethany Bennett. She best book of 2021 aside from mine was hers, which is West End Girl. And she's coming over from the States, and so we've been talking for like 2 years now.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, so I can't wait.
Cute. That'll be exciting. Okay, so question number 5. What was your favorite subject at school?
Usually it would be a toss-up between English and drama.
Mm-hmm.
They were my big ones. Probably English. I always loved to write. You know, I always wanted to be an author my whole life. Always loved to read. Like that's where I was. I think because I was. The thing about moving every 2 years when you're really young and you don't have the internet, because I'm not, is that, you know, you lost everybody every 2 years. Like you lost all your friendships, and so it got to the point where, you know, I didn't really focus on making a lot of friends in school because I knew that I was just going to lose them anyway. And so I would have books instead because I could take the books with me. So, yeah, reading and writing was always such a big part of my life. That's my favourite 2 subjects.
I think mine were the same, like English and drama, but probably the other way around. Like I think drama was always my favourite. Yeah. English I did well at, but I didn't actually ever study anything. I mean, that's pretty much a standard in my life still. Okay, so now we get into the serious questions. Okay, so as we said before, you have had a few varying careers in your time. So can you tell us about those and how they relate to the discussion around STEM and International Youth Day?
Yeah, so you know, like I said, always wanted to be an author, always wanted to be in publishing. So I came out of high school, I went straight into a film and television degree, which I did a year of and realized I hated being on set. And then I did writing. I did a writing degree. I went to work for a publishing company. Sorry, that's my puppy. I went to work for a publishing company, and then after the publishing company, I worked for Queensland Theatre Company for a few years in the publicity and marketing. And then I decided I was going to be an author. And the only way to be an author was to quit my full-time job and work in a bar and get my book written, which was so stupid. Because I quit my job, I didn't get my book written, and the global financial crisis hit, and I could not get back into my career.
Right.
So I was just like, oh crap, what am I going to do now? And somebody suggested going into teaching, and because then I would have my summer holidays to write books. And so I did a primary school teaching degree, and while I was there, you know, as a primary school teacher, you have to learn how to teach everything. You know, you can't just do English and drama. You've got to learn how to teach math and science. And I had this professor who was teaching science education, and she had like this curly red hair and these knee-high boots, and she was so entertaining. And I had the biggest girl crush on her. Like, I'm totally straight. I'm just like, you are amazing. And the way she would teach it was through story. And I mean, I'm a writer. I love story. And so her name was Dr. Ali Samuel, and it's absolutely no coincidence that the heroine in my second book, who is a woman in STEM, looks exactly like her. That's not. And so after doing my primary teaching degree, and that was when I fell in love with science, and I was 27 at that point. It had been something that interested me at all. But as soon as I had a really engaging, amazing teacher who helped me connect with science in a way that was relevant to me, I was just like, this is the best thing ever. And so I went on to do a Masters of Science Education, which specifically looked at the Australian National Curriculum and how do we teach primary school and secondary school. And I did some physics courses there. And then I went into, and I became a primary school teacher who really focused on the science. Obviously, that was my favourite subject. And then I realised that I didn't like children, which is slightly problematic when you're a primary school teacher.
Yeah.
I loved my kids. I was teaching year 5, 6, so they were kind of like 12, 13 years old.
Yeah.
And that was great. We were all reading the Hunger Games together, and like, it was fine. But then my principal said to me, so Samara, next year you're going down into the year 1, 2s. And I'm like,
no, I'm not.
Can I not? Like, can I just stay with the older kids? And he's like, or I can get you a job in a high school. And I went, okay, let's go with the high school option.
Yeah.
And so that's how I became a high school teacher. And I taught senior physics and drama.
Oh,
and
okay.
I got to be like, I think I was perhaps the only dual physics drama teacher in Victoria.
Yeah.
Maybe ever. I don't know. But, just my background, in both of those. And I loved it. I loved it. I loved my kids. I loved the subject matter. I'm so sorry. She's just like, if I locked her up, it would probably be worse. Puppies, people. Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. And then the last year that I was at this particular school, we had a new principal come in, and the school was declining. We had people were leaving. We actually called it the white flight. The school was about 50% African refugees, and every year more and more Caucasian parents were pulling their children out of the school, which was really disappointing because there was no need or reason for that. It wasn't a bad school. It wasn't a violent school. It had there was no. Anyway, that's a slightly separate story. So the principal came in and was like, we're going to do education differently. We're going to throw out the curriculum. We're going to do things so different to the way they've been done before. Essentially, it's going to be student-based learning. It's all student choice. The students would choose what subjects they did. We wouldn't force them to do home economics if they don't want to do home economics. But also, we wouldn't teach home economics. Yeah. Like, it would be, okay, cool. Like, maybe the students are saying that they want to, as an example, the kids, they wanted to study robotics. So it wasn't a computer science course, it was a robotics course. Yeah. Right? They turned around and they went, we really want to study space. And so it's not like we taught year 10 science, we were going to teach space. And within that, the students get to choose the work that they do. So you could have a class where, let's just say it's space, right? You could have a bunch of kids planning a mission to Mars, and you could have some other kids designing a telescope and looking at optics, and you might have some other kids writing a short story about, something space related. So students got to engage with their subjects in a way that interested them. Right. And also in a way that met them at their level. Yeah. So, an example of that was in my robotics class. I had a bunch of kids come up to me and be like, Miss, we don't want to be doing Lego robots. Like, we want to be doing robots. And I'm like, okay, That's fine. You just have to know that I don't know how to code. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how to code. If you get stuck, I can sit down with you and try and work it out, but I'm not going to be able to give you the answers because I don't.
Yeah.
And they just, they went off. And then I had another kid who had, plenty of difficulties, and we would spend most of the lessons just sitting together sorting Lego pieces. And it was 4 or 5 weeks into the class, and he was still building his robot while everybody else was programming.
Mm.
And I remember he said to me, he's like, "Miss, are you unhappy with me?" And I'm like, "Dude, are you learning?" He went, "Yes." I went, "Are you working?" He's like, "Yes." I went, "Are you happy?" He's like, "Yes." I'm like, "Well, then I'm happy, dude." Like, so it was really, grades weren't the focus of the report card. Yeah. It was. So it was something new.
Yeah.
It was something new, and it was so good for the students. And this was in Melbourne. And then my husband got a PhD opportunity up here in Canberra. And so we left, and I came to Canberra and went back into the normal education system. And I only lasted 5 weeks, and I had to quit. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. They wanted me to teach science out of a textbook. They wanted me to write a damn textbook.
Yeah.
They didn't want to pay for textbooks, but we want everyone to work from a textbook. So, hey, write it. And it's just like, dude, come on. How to teach science. Like, this is why people get through their entire schooling without realizing that science is amazing.
Yeah.
You got teachers like this.
Well, I guess this leads on to the next question. So number 7 is, how do you think we can change the pipeline from primary school to high school to university to make STEM more diverse and inclusive? So, I mean, obviously the way you were talking about how you taught it was the fact that allows people at different levels and different interests to learn what they want. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's one to start with.
Yeah, honestly, I think the education system needs to change.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, having been through that process and how difficult it was for us to make that shift. There's a lot of inertia. So I think that we need to start focusing on, firstly, like meeting kids at their level and meeting kids at their interest. Mm-hmm. There's no reason that somebody who has a love of writing and story can't demonstrate the same understandings of concepts as somebody who likes to draw diagrams. They can still do that. We need to be meeting people at their ability level, especially the further on through schooling you get, the more kids are just pushed up and up and up. And, a good teacher is always going to be able to adapt their teaching to suit, but, to an extent, right? Like, teachers, the amount of work that they have on their plate, they can't do individual lesson plans for every kid on there. Yeah. So I think the way that we teach, the way that the school system is structured needs to change. I think that there's still really outdated concepts of how to teach science. If you're teaching science with a textbook, that's a problem. Yeah. Like, in my view, the textbooks, the only time that me and the other people on my team would use textbooks is if we were going to be sick or if we were going to be away. Yeah. You do not want to give a practical activity to a substitute teacher who doesn't know the kids, like, not going to behave for them. It's like, okay, cool. And that was literally it. We would use it. That was the only reason we would have a textbook, is for the days that we were there. Otherwise, it's being hands-on. It's being hands-on, or it's telling stories, and so, but there's still a lot of people, still a lot of teachers who rely on a textbook, sometimes because they're a little bit lazy and outdated, or, and this is probably more often, because the teachers themselves are not confident with the science, especially when you're looking at primary school. Yeah. There's the number of teachers who are not comfortable with science, and so they either don't teach it or they teach it from a textbook because that's comfortable for them.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other thing is obviously like science does evolve so much. So if you've been teaching science for 30 years, you kind of like the textbooks would change every single year, right? And you don't have time to go out and re-educate yourself constantly. So I can understand from that perspective of trying to stay up to date. But then it's also the type of thing of like some science hasn't changed since the 40s, which is like, should you still be teaching it then? Or do you need a textbook? Could you should know it off by heart now?
Yeah, it's just feeling comfortable. You know, when you've got a textbook, the kids are seated
Yeah.
either in rows or at tables, and it's very very controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And moving to an environment where the kids are up and they're moving around the classroom and they're using this and they're using that, like you got to be able to let the control freak go a little bit.
Yeah.
And that I struggle with. You know me, I'm a control freak. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess the other thing that would help, so there's the changing the way that like the school is structured, changing how we teach to make sure that we're teaching interactively, supporting teachers so that they are comfortable with the science. And then lastly, what was it? Oh yeah, representation.
Yeah.
More than anything, representation. And that comes in a number of ways. I mean, I am the perfect example. Dr. Ali Semmel, I looked at her and I'm like, I want to be her.
Yeah.
No, she was nothing like I had experienced before in a science teacher.
Yeah.
At all. And I connected so heavily with it. And you can see that you can see it there. You're more likely to have biology teachers that are female than physics teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see more female biology or women biology students.
Yeah.
Girls, women, than you will in physics.
Yeah.
You know, and part of that is representation. Like, do girls see themselves in the people who are teaching?
Yeah.
And you know, and that's not just a gender thing. You know, in the school that I worked at, you know, working with so many people from different cultures, countries, you know, they'd been in camps where there wasn't a whole lot of education programs running,
Mm-hmm.
and they often didn't see themselves in science education, and so they didn't value it as much, you know, as they potentially valued other things. So I think that you know, representation is important, and that doesn't mean that an old white dude can't be great for representation.
Yeah.
Because if that old white dude is engaging with the students about the things that they enjoy, if that old white dude is sharing his life with them and people can go, oh, he's really into Game of Thrones. It's dating me a little bit, but you know, like going up and having conversations. There was this one student, a young boy, and every, like, I don't know, it must have been like Monday or whatever it was, the next school day after Game of Thrones, he'd be coming up to me going, Miss, did you see the last Game of Thrones? What did you think about this? And I'd be like, Jamie, you are too young to be watching Game of Thrones, but wasn't this fabulous? So you can imagine, like, if you're connecting with students at that level, they can see themselves in you regardless of what your race or your gender or your age is.
Yeah.
That is also still representation, because they're seeing this person and going, oh, I like this person. I can see myself. Yeah. It's so connections, representation, it's connections.
Like, I guess the other thing, like, I am a bit conscious of time, but I'll just quickly ask this thing. Obviously, with the education system, how it's set up, it all goes towards university, which then goes towards a career. So if, hypothetically, universities change their expectations of entry, would that then trickle down to high school, to primary school? Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of like...
I don't think that that's the major problem. So most students, in my experience, most students know what their year 11 and 12 subjects are going to be in year 8.
Yeah.
Maybe year 9. So if they haven't seen a future in science
they're not going
prior
to go
that,
for it. Yeah.
they're not going to. I think that, I mean, yeah, I think that it's more like it's really at a primary school and very early high schools level that we need to change things, because that will then lead into their year 10, 11 and 12 subject selections, and it's those selections that then lead to university.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the next question was going to be, when teaching, what was one of the biggest barriers you faced with working with young women / people from diverse backgrounds? But I think you've already covered that. So I'm just going to skip ahead to number 9, which is, how do you see the future of STEM progressing? Big broad one, just for fun.
Yeah. Look, I think that we're going into a culture where students don't really have a choice. So much of what we do is being automated.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to be part of it. Most of them are going to be part, like that's just where our future is going. They're going to be part of it, or they're going to be part of arts. That's another thing that can't be automated.
Yeah.
Or ideally both. Hey.
Yeah.
Arts and STEM. But I think what needs to change is that students aren't going to go, oh, I really like biology, so I'm going to study that. Oh, I really like physics, so I'm going to study that. They're going to go, oh, I am so interested in doing something that impacts health or that sort of stuff. Well, I really want to go to the moon.
Yeah.
I really want to have this impact. I think that we can't estimate how much this generation wants to have an impact.
Yeah.
We can't underestimate how much the current state of everything is shaping these young people.
Yeah.
They're a really incredible generation. This is not STEM related, but I want to bring it up to talk about how incredible these younger generations are. And it's in language, right? And a lot of people get really, really cranky and be like, oh, what are you talking? Okay, so for example, irregardless got added to the dictionary in 2020. A lot of people are really pissed off because they're like, irregardless isn't a word. And it's like, well, actually, technically it now is.
Mm-hmm.
But that aside, what this generation is doing with language is so interesting because they're now, so much of their communication is not face-to-face.
Yeah.
They're adapting and they're finding other ways to communicate facial expressions and body language.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using it's more than just emojis. They're using punctuation. There's a whole like /s if something's sarcastic, and they've just changed language in a way that it hasn't been changed in ages. And I think that that's something to get excited about, because I think it really just shows how they're just doing what they need to do, doing what they want to do, and just they're so independent. They're so independent, and they have so many opinions, and it's exciting. It's so exciting to see how I mean, yeah, just how opinion and how sure of themselves, and how, and they'll do the research, and they're going to be an incredible generation, and they have to be.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, they are going to be the generation that has to fix the mistakes of the older generation, and there's some big ones lately. So, but they're so capable of doing it. I'm just so excited.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also one of those interesting things. It's probably the first generation ever that when they're starting primary school, the jobs that they have don't exist.
No.
Or sorry, the jobs that most of them will have are not even thought of just yet. So that's going to be really interesting when that whole thing catches up to the education system, because how do you choose subjects in year 11 or year 8 for year 11 and 12 when the job hasn't even evolved to a point where we can teach it? Like, even doing my work right now, like, I find it quite interesting when I say, like, I just did a grad cert in diversity and inclusion. People are like, that exists? And it's sort of like, well, it does now. Obviously, it didn't before, and it was only one of 2 in Australia.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like that thing of, how, like, what's going to be the jobs that people have. And that's super weird.
I know, and so we just got to focus on skills, and science inquiry skills.
Yeah.
Are just so important, probably the most important. And also there's a thread of the curriculum called Science as a Human Endeavour, which is talking about how humans have used science and the impacts that it has. And that's a really important, it often gets overlooked in science programs because the curriculum is just so packed.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to focus more on that if we're going to encourage people to come into science. Is we need to focus on the impact that science has had on people's lives, and inspire students that way.
Well, actually, that once again leads perfectly to question 10. So as part of the outreach committee, what advice would you give TMOS members who want to help make change to like STEM and youth and education?
Get in contact, because do school visits. Like we have just, like the outreach committee has just put together a couple of workshops that are fabulous workshops that go through. One is the history of optics, another is, or the history of light. The other one is all about holograms, and another one about diffraction. So we've got these workshops that you can just pick up and take to a school. But when you go to those schools, what's really, really important, maybe even more than the science that you're teaching, is that the students see you as a person and see you as something like that they kind of want to be like, or they kind of understand that you're a whole human being. And by whole human being, I mean that it's more than just the science. You are what you like, you are the way you speak, you are, and a really great example of that was Wendy, who is one of our University of Melbourne PhD students. When we did a Questacon workshop, she presented one of these workshops, and she's so dry, like her like really sarcastic and really and she was so funny.
Yeah.
She was so funny, and she came to me and she's like, oh, I'm just worried that I'm really awkward. And I'm like, well, you are, but in a really good way. You were really real.
Yeah.
You were like, and kids are going to look at you and just feel a connection with you because you weren't trying to put on a show. You were just being you, and you is a very cool, like not necessarily like the cool girls at school, but just like you're such an individual that you're just super cool, and kids are going to see that no matter how awkward you are. So,
like, I was lucky enough last week to listen to Jagadish talk about his from where he started to how he got to where he is, and it's such an interesting story, and so he tells it so humbly, and it is humbling as well. But it's just like, I think that's what people forget, is that people don't start where they end up. People have lots of failures in the end. Like when he was talking about how many rejection letters he got, I'm like, oh my God, like what? And then it's like, wouldn't get physics jobs, but now is like the head of the physics. Oh my God, hang on. What is it? School of, I know this.
Academy of Science.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry, the science stuff still does confuse me. But it's just that amazing thing of like listening to those stories is what changes perceptions about how all of this works. I think because even coming into TMOS, like the science still terrifies me because I always like, oh, I did bad at science, so I'm never going to understand it. But I think that's also because I've not had someone sort of talk me through it in a way that isn't about the science. Like when Madhu sort of explained things to me, I'm like, cool, get it. Or when I've listened to Drago's introduction to what TMOS is, I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing. But when you get sort of bogged down into the actual like figures or stuff, I'm like,
and I think the key there is, and it comes back to like my obsession, which is story.
Yeah.
Like the reason that I am so passionate about science is because it's essentially the story of mankind. And it's the story of who we are and our place in this universe. And, you know, when I teach science through metaphor. I teach science through connecting it. You know, we were talking about, one of the bodily systems. And I think it was like this gland here was the principal, and these other glands were like the teachers, and, you know, and just so that they could understand like the hierarchy of this particular and it, you know, and they got that because that was a story that they could connect to. And so the way that Dragomir explains what we're doing, he's connecting it to you, what you want. And
perfect. Okay, so basically tell stories for science.
Tell stories.
That's your message. Tell
stories and be human. Don't be putting on a show. Just, you know, you got into science for a reason. Like, you don't accidentally become a physics PhD student. That's not, well, maybe
someone would have at some point.
At some point somebody probably did, but, you know, you're doing it because you love it. So share love for it is what I would say.
Okay, cute. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Samara, and thank you all for listening in. And we will talk to you next month with someone else. All right, have a good day. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.